All right, of course, all guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. Make sure you pick up a six-pack of Johnny Cuba, your local Sedanos, Presidente, Winn-Dixie, Fresco y Mas. Always drink responsibly. And, of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Our pal is Jamey Eisenberg, CBS Sports Fantasy Football. Nobody does it better than Jamey. Thanks again for joining us here, of course. And we'll go over the actual, Super Bowl, how you think guys are going to perform. It'll help with, as far as the prop bets and all that good stuff. So we'll do that next week. Let's talk about the actual games from this past weekend. What did you make of Lamar Jackson's performance? Offensively, the lack of running the football. What did you make of what took place?
Yeah, good to talk to you, Zaz. I think the biggest thing you said it was the game plan. The fact that they had, I think it was 11 rush attempts total. He had the majority of that. No running back had more than 3 carries. And for a team in Kansas City that has been so good against the pass and struggling against the run, you would have thought that that's more design runs from Lamar Jackson. I know Gus Edwards and Justice Hill are somewhat limited. They just brought in Dalvin Cook for the playoffs. So not a lot of faith in their running backs, but at least, for a game that was decided by 7 points, it was clearly competitive throughout and close throughout, that you could have leaned on your backfield and your running game a lot more and maybe taken some pressure off of Lamar Jackson, who we know is probably trying to go out and prove that he's the MVP, prove that he can get his team to a Super Bowl and eventually win one. And it was just a strange game plan across the board. So, I mean, look, he struggled. Zay Flowers scores a touchdown on that play. It's a different story. We may be looking at a different outcome, but it wasn't his best performance, clearly, based on what we saw the week before against Houston and at times throughout the course of the season.
And now the criticism is going to continue to be loud about Lamar Jackson. Like, he's likely going to win the MVP. And it's going to be like that year where Dirk Nowitzki won it in 2007, and they're handing it to him like via satellites. He's not playing anymore.
Yeah, it's until he does it and gets there. And unfortunately, you want to continue the NBA comparisons. It feels as if we're living in 90s Bulls era again, when you're trying to get past Patrick Mahomes. And he's just that good. And in a down year where they had to go on the road and win in the playoffs in Buffalo and win in Baltimore and still getting the job done, getting to another Super Bowl when Travis Kelce's 34 and looking like he's 44, but still producing in the playoffs, and Andy Reid relying on his defense as opposed to his offense. This team is still going to be a force to be reckoned with for many, many years, as long as Mahomes is healthy and that team is still humming at that level that they're capable of. So it's tough. It's going to be tough for Lamar Jackson. It's going to be tough for Joe Burrow, tough for Josh Allen. That's just the hump that these guys have to get over. Mahomes is just that good, and Andy Reid is just that good of a coach. And as long as that pairing is still there, really as long as Mahomes is there, it's going to be difficult for a lot of those teams in the AFC.
Kelce's production, especially the targets from Mahomes, Kelce's production has been so much greater in the postseason than it was in the regular season this year. Like, he was a little bit at times a disappointment, I think, fantasy-wise, Travis Kelce. But what we're seeing in the postseason, and 2 of the 3 games he's had double-digit catches, is more like what we're accustomed to. What do you think that's about? Is it just as simple as Mahomes is leaning on the guy that he trusts in the biggest spots?
Yeah, and I think that's a credit to Andy Reid and just designing more plays to put him in spots that are a little bit more successful. But really, it's just a matter of, I think they have the ability to, like most great players, to flip a switch and put up or perform and put up numbers that we're used to seeing the great ones do. And those 2 guys are great at what they do. You're going to potentially look at them as arguably the best players at their respective positions. Kelsey's right there now, passing Jerry Rice for postseason receptions and just accomplishing everything that he's done in his career, and hopefully comes back for at least one more season. Mahomes, we know, is trending toward becoming one of the greatest, if not the best quarterbacks of all time. So the connection's been one of the best in NFL history already. And, when you get to the playoffs, it's not like Kelce was hurt. He may have been playing hurt. I shouldn't say that. He may have been playing hurt at some point during the regular season and finally got healthy. But just the great one's ability to turn it on when the lights are the brightest. And that's what we're seeing from those 2 players right now.
We just got word here, actually, that Dan Quinn is the new coach of the Washington Commanders. You got any thoughts there? It's a pretty underwhelming hire, if you ask me.
It felt like they struck out a little bit. I thought Ben Johnson was almost a done deal, knowing that there was the possibility of, a fresh restart with a young offensive coordinator who's been one of the better offense coordinators for the last year plus. So yeah, to go the Dan Quinn route feels like it's okay. A guy that, and look, he earned it. What he did, going from the Atlanta situation to Dallas as a defense coordinator and turning that defense around. He's definitely put himself in position to be a head coach once again. But it just doesn't feel like this is a win. It feels like it's a settle for type of situation. The fact that we're now gone through the coaching cycle and no Bill Belichick, no Mike Vrabel. Certainly the latter is a little bit not as prominent as the former. The fact that Bill Belichick did not get a job, I don't know if it was money, if it was wanting too much power, but to see some of these young offensive coordinators, just young coordinators to begin with, because Mike McDonald's not an offensive guy, but these young coordinators getting jobs, it shows you where the NFL is trending right now and how I think these franchises want to go. So we'll see. Jerry Jones apparently said something the other day about that he wouldn't mind working with Bill Belichick, or he's not afraid to work with Belichick. So you wonder if now that they know that Belichick's not getting a opening, does a team with a head coach in place make a strange or decision that may surprise us a little bit, and they remove their guy to bring in somebody like Belichick? I don't know if that'll happen, but wouldn't necessarily shock me if it goes that route.
It's always weird to me when a team like Washington, in this case, hires a defensive guy as the head coach. They have a high draft pick. They're going to try. They're likely going to draft a quarterback. And if that rookie quarterback has a good first season or even second season, what ends up happening? The offensive coordinator there gets hired somewhere else to be a head coach. And now you got to hire a new offensive coordinator. When if you go with an offensive head coach, that guy's not going anywhere. That's the offense. He's the guy. So I always think it's weird in a spot like the Commanders are in to hire a defensive head coach.
It didn't feel like there was any of the prominent offensive guys that were still out there that they probably liked. Bobby Sloag staying in Houston, and again Ben Johnson staying in Detroit. Was there somebody else out there that they felt is going to be a home run? And to your point, also they're coming off of a defensive coach too. Ron Rivera. Typically when you see a team struggling, they go the opposite direction. Granted, new ownership, so fresh start across the board. And did they want a proven guy to be there? And look, maybe they keep Eric Bieniemy as the offense coordinator, and they just decide, okay, it wasn't his fault that the offense struggled, and we're going to give everybody an opportunity with a new quarterback to sort of retool from that side of the ball. But obviously, Dan Quinn's going to want to bring in his own guy, so we'll see what the hire is. But yes, you're right. When you do have new quarterback and offense coordinator, especially if it's somebody that's not established, coming into a situation like that, it could be Dave Canales, it could be as we saw Mike McDaniel, for example. Any of these young offensive coordinators tend to, or young offensive coaches tend to jump ship whenever the quarterback does do well.
Do you think Belichick is done?
I don't think so, but a 70-plus-year-old guy taking a year off, if he goes to the right situation where he has a good personnel, for a good front office in place where he doesn't have to deal with personnel, I don't think coaching was ever an issue for him. It was just some of the decisions that built that team up over the last couple of years. Obviously, Brady propped up a lot of things toward the end of his tenure there. But defensively, they were still very solid last year. Just offensively, they were flawed. And I think that had to do with how they built that team. So we're not expecting to be done. And again, I would not be surprised if there's a team, I don't want to necessarily say guys getting fired, but let's just say Tampa Bay, for example. Would they necessarily say, okay, we can move on from Todd Bowles and go get a Bill Belichick and see if we can go win another Super Bowl? Wouldn't shock me if something like that happened.
Good job, Jamey. We'll get you on again next week, of course, and we'll go over some props and how you feel the players are going to perform. We'll try and make some folks the money. You got all your regular stuff going on this weekend that folks can still check you out even with no football?
We're still podcasting. We do that 3 days a week. We're doing 5 days a week next week for the Super Bowl. I'm actually headed to the Pro Bowl tonight, so I'll be in Orlando just talking to a couple of players there for practices. I will not stay for the Sunday festivities, but I'll be there trying to get as much information as I can because I like to provide our audience with as much info as we can get in the offseason. So check out our podcast. You can always follow me on Twitter as well.
I was watching some of the clips. There were some clips going around on Instagram yesterday of old Pro Bowl skills competition. When you used to have the quarterbacks and they got to throw at the bullseyes and the moving targets. And there were some Marino clips on it. I'm like, oh my, if you're young, you don't even know. Marino, it was so money. And those old quarterback skills competitions just throwing bullseye after bullseye at the moving targets.
Yeah, he wasn't shooting for the 20. He was shooting for the 50 almost every time.
The moving target from 50 yards out, just hitting that bullseye. It was such a cool event. What is the Pro Bowl now even? What do they do?
They do some games around it. I think they do flag football, but there's dodgeball. I think there's tug of war. They try to make it fun for, the audience at this point while not putting the players at risk. It's just not the same.
I don't have time for that. Good job, Jamey. We'll talk next week, man. Thank you.
You got it, bud. Take care.
Perfect. Thank you, dude.
You got it, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a safe trip. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, bud.